Thank you. Well, thank you and very welcome to the second day of Adobe Symposium. This is the first of many amazing breakout sessions that we have planned for you. But before we start, I've got one more question. How many of you have a data lake initiative running within your organisation today? Can I have a show of hands? Yeah, there's a few. Yeah. That's not surprising. And the reason why? Because the most cited reason for not being able to deliver valuable customer experiences are four things. And I'd love to see whether these resonate with you. Having multiple data silos containing fragmented data sets. Does that resonate? Yeah? Having multiple lengthy processes which make it difficult to extract and activate insights in real time. Having audiences that are diverse and distinct within their needs. And being bound by legacy organisational structures and mindsets that are simply not conducive to an experienced business. They're the four reasons that we hear most about. So with the explosion of real-time digital customer data, businesses are really being forced to re-architect their technology systems, as you know. So in 2018, data lakes, digital identity, real-time decisioning, and the single customer view are all critical capabilities within your experienced business. And the three questions we hear from you all most is, what does great look like? Who's doing this well? And where should we start? So today, we're going to explore those questions with you. Today, we're going to hear from three exceptional speakers who are going to share with us their advice on these three questions. Tom is going to share with us how to develop an experienced system of record and make your data actionable. We're going to hear from Youssef, and he's going to talk to us about the experience and the journey that Westpac New Zealand have been on with regards to building an experience architecture within their enterprise. And thirdly, we'll hear from Kristina from BT, and she's going to talk to us about how she's bringing multiple teams together to create that unified customer experience we're all aiming to deliver on. And her and her team are breathing life into understanding their customers. So without further ado, I'd like to learn more about developing an experienced system of record and to make your data actionable, please join me in welcoming Tom Braybrook. Tom leads the digital strategy and technology solutions across Adobe's experience business. His role is to work with Adobe's commercial, education and government clients to provide strategic guidance and thought leadership on emerging technologies, digital innovation and customer experience strategy. So Tom, please join us on stage.
Thank you so much, Carly. Morning, everyone. As Carly said, welcome to day two. So I'm going to touch on a topic that you would have seen a sneak peek of on stage yesterday, and it's actually been a big engineering and product effort for us over the last 2 years. Adobe has made a huge investment in what we're calling the Adobe Cloud Platform, and to kind of summarize what we're talking about here, the need that we've heard from a lot of customers is that we fundamentally need what we call a system of record when it comes to customer experiences. There's a big drive from all of you as businesses today to put your customers at the center of your business and operations. But when it comes to the data, we hear two key challenges, and Carly touched on this a second ago. The first is that data fragmentation. It's the thing that we hear time and time again. It's that you've got various systems collecting customer data, and that may be organizations having multiple CRMs, you've got analytics collecting data from different places, you've got advertising data, and so your data's fragmented. And typically, for those that have embarked on this data lake initiative or trying to bring those systems together, what you may be finding is that you're having to ETL data out of multiple places, and that's introducing friction and latency quite often, so that these systems are taking time to bring the data together. And the final thing there is that even some of these legacy systems just aren't typically built for the scale that we're talking about in terms of streaming customer events in real time. The vast amount of digital, mobile, even Internet of Things analytics that's starting to come through. So we've been on a big drive. It's been a top 3 initiative for us over the last 2 years to essentially build a platform that enables you as our customers to build capabilities and applications on top of the Adobe stack and really start to extend on the solutions that and that you probably use today. Quick question for you guys. I want to kind of understand the room. Who would class themselves as more of an architect or analyst, developer, someone on more of the technical side of the equation? That's good. About a third. And so the rest of you have to put your hands up. I would assume you're more on the kind of business practitioner side, your marketing, customer experience. Put your hands up. Wow, actually more of the room. Okay. So I'll try and tailor the narrative to this because it can get quite technical. So as we speak to our customers and we've been developing this platform capability, we've heard a really common thing across all types of industries, common challenges. And the way that we're approaching this is a bit of a simplified version of what you may have seen on main stage yesterday, because we're talking purely about the data components. The first is that starting with data ingestion. Those that have data lake initiatives will be familiar with this. There's two ways that we need to look at this. There's, bringing together the various customer data sources that you have in your organization, CRM, maybe ERP, maybe point of sale, and so on. But then also providing real-time streaming capability for, the fast-moving data that you have. So digital analytics, for example, advertising, as well as real-time customer events. So bringing that data together. Then the second thing is what we call semantics and control. So what we're saying here is we need this data to talk a common language. All too often, you're wrestling with lots of different log files and data sources that are just structured in completely different ways. And you have effectively data scientists that are being hired to do data science that are wrestling that data and trying to understand and bring that together. So we've developed a capability we'll talk about called the Experience Data Model, which looks to bring that together under a common semantic layer and then provide controls around how that data should be used. And the control part's really important. This is you being able to define what systems should be ingesting that data and actually using it, whether that data is personal or if it's anonymous, and then what types of use cases and also users in your organization should have access to that data as well. Really important for governance, for privacy reasons. The third piece on here is where we start to take it into the world of insights. So we've brought data in, we've brought it together under a common layer, and then we need to use techniques such as machine learning to derive insight from this. And this is purely because when we think about customer experience, the sheer scale and velocity of this data requires us as humans to have a helping hand here. So we'll talk about our approach to machine learning and AI and how we're starting to converge that with your efforts that you may be making as a business. And then the final piece, surprise, surprise, we need to action the data. So we'll talk about the methods that we're now able to expose this data both within the Adobe ecosystem and also to your own enterprise systems as well. So let me give you a quick architecture view of this. And this is a very, very high-level view of our efforts to date that will touch on those 4 points. And the first foundational layer here is really around infrastructure and the platform services that we have been building. So we announced a very strategic partnership with Microsoft around about 18 months ago. And so the first iteration of this platform is leveraging a lot of Azure's cloud services here. And really what we're looking at here is a range of data ingestion methods that I'll show you in a second, as well as this notion of an experience data model, which looks to bring this data under a common model and allows you to extend into that as well. The next part is the intelligence services. So you would have heard us talk about Adobe Sensei yesterday. And if anyone's been to events past, we've made a real big effort to double down on machine learning capabilities. So Adobe Sensei today is a range of features that are powered by machine learning that Adobe build. But I'll show you how we're actually opening up that framework so that you can start to bring your own models, your own data science expertise into the platform and start to extend once again. And then the final piece, for those of you that raised your hand who are more on the development side, I'll ask you later if you're using Adobe IO, and if not, definitely have a look at it. This is absolutely critical. We can do all of the stuff below, but unless we can actually open up services to developers, to your partners, to your technical teams to be able to essentially do everything that you would want to in a UI through an API, as well as investment in things like serverless environments so that you can go and you can code in our platform and you can start to run that and you can start to process it within the platform itself. The interesting thing here is you're not seeing me talk about any Adobe solutions, the things that you know today. This is really a foundational platform that we're using to underpin the Adobe solutions that you use today. So it's us entering a very kind of different way of looking at this in a different world. Okay, so let me start with data integration. And we're approaching this in 4 key ways when we think about how we want to bring data into the platform. And if we start at the top and the most obvious, which is the Adobe solutions. So we have been through an effort with all of our engineering teams across, Adobe Analytics, Target, Audience Manager, Campaign, and so on. everybody's mandated to have a capability to stream data in near real time into the platform. So we're going through that effort now, and that means that as we're collecting data on your behalf, you'll have the option, as this becomes available, to automatically stream that in real time into the platform itself. The second piece here relates to our tag management capability. So those of you that are long-standing Adobe customers will know that we've been through a few iterations when it comes to tag management. Dynamic Tag Manager was probably one of the big acquisitions we made a few years back, and we've completely re-architected that from the ground up. So without going into too much detail, if you're an Adobe customer and you're not using Adobe Launch, take a look at it. It's free, it's there for you to use, and it's basically open source so that you can actually build your own extensions onto this. You can manage the JavaScript you're loading onto your pages, the way that you're collecting data, and then bring together that standard data model to get data into the platform itself. Very, very flexible. But where this really comes alive is when we start to think about the kind of world outside of Adobe and customer experience. So we've built partnerships with a couple of key IT-focused ETL platforms. So these platforms that are there for you to manage all of the data across your enterprise system. So companies like Informatica, Unify, SnapLogic, we now have integrated into the platform, into our standard data model. So that means that we can actually really have this sit alongside your own data lake efforts itself. And then the final piece, we know there's always a custom use case, right? There's always a homegrown system or a customization you've made to something where you will want to write data to us via an API, take data out. You might want to actually query and get some visibility on the data model that we have. So absolutely everything that I'll talk about and show you today is API enabled and documented on Adobe IO so that you can have the flexibility to build into this in much more of a custom way if you need to. So we've brought data together, range of flexible ways to bring that in, and now we want to essentially get this data talking the same language. So this notion of a common semantic layer is something you'll hear us talk a lot about, and then the controls that we can put in place to help you manage access to that data. So we spoke about experience data model yesterday, and the one thing I want to kind of demystify here is this isn't Adobe shoehorning you into a data model that we've created. So we've come to market with this notion of an experience data model, and we've set a baseline around making sure that the data you collect in, say, analytics, campaign, and audience manager fits into one data model. You no longer have to wrestle that, prop 3 is this variable, and we're calling it something else in audience manager, and we get the data together and it doesn't make any sense. We'll be on a drive to bring all of this into one standard data model, but the key thing here is that it's completely open source. So you can find this on GitHub. We've been collaborating a lot with our partners, specifically Microsoft here, so that this will translate directly into Microsoft's customer data model that they have, and also with those partners such as Informatica, SnapLogic, so that it can relate directly to your CRM, your ERP systems, and so on. So this is open, and it's completely extensible, and I'll show you some of the flexibility that you have, because we know that each of your businesses is completely unique, and it's no point in us trying to shoehorn you into a standard model that you can't customize. Okay, so let me show you a quick bit. And if we go over to my demo machine, this is the Adobe Cloud Platform. You would have seen a good colleague of mine, Ian De Jong, on main stage yesterday would have shown you some of the screenshots on here. So I'll aim to kind of reiterate some of those points and take you through this. So the obvious starting point for us is around the data sources itself. And you can see that I've got a number of data sources from across different parts of the business here. But I'll give you a sense as to how we can take data into the system. And we've got standard connectors in here where you've got the ability to it could be an ad hoc file that you want to bring in, a list of customer information, or maybe your data science team have put together some customer scores. Where it gets really interesting are the API connections that we've got into leading CRMs as well. So you've got Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce CRM, both with real-time API connections so that you can read and write data in real time. And this is hugely important, right? Because we know that CRM is probably the key connection point outside of the Adobe ecosystem for you guys. As I mentioned before, big investment for us to make sure that every Adobe solution automatically streams data in for you. And then the final piece is, I know some of you in the room will be using ETL tools such as Informatica. We've pre-built those integrations there so that we'll be able to share data both in and out of the platform. let me talk a little bit around the controls around that data. So we've brought data in, we've got a number of sources, and then one of the things that we'll obviously want to do is we want to label that. And I think Ian showed you this yesterday, but this is massively important. This is where you can start to label things around, contractual uses. Maybe this is actually data that a partner shared with you, and you shouldn't be using it for certain use cases. You've got identity data, so being able to flag if this is personal data or if it's anonymous, device-based data, as well as things such as the sensitivity of that as well. We know that there are use cases where you've got, say, ad impression data that should not be finding its way into an outbound call center, or it may be personal data that should not be finding its way back into an advertising system in its current form. So this is massively important to make sure that you've got a really flexible framework around data governance itself. And then the other piece here is around the experience data model. So we've got the data in, we've labeled it in the right way, and if I take a typical use case around customer data itself, here's an example of how you can actually define the schema for that. So relating to the experience data model, you can go in and you can set, say, a hierarchy around what types of attributes you're using here. But within every part of this, you can go ahead and say within the address part of this schema, you can go ahead and you can start to extend on this and you can customize it to meet the needs of your business as well. We've spoken about how we bring the data in, how we get it all talking the same language, and we manage controls around that. Now we'll get on to some more of the interesting parts. And if anyone's keen on this, I'd hope to see you at 11 a.m. down in the Piermont Theatre. We're going to be talking about this subject in a bit more detail. But as I mentioned before, to do this stuff at scale, to derive insight at scale, we need a helping hand. And the topic of machine learning is, it's something that we're invested in very heavily, but we know that the majority of your organizations are making deep investment in this as well. Today, if you have been exposed to what we're doing with Adobe Sensei, we've got more than 80 features across the Experience Cloud that are powered by Sensei. So they're machine learning features, they're things such as anomaly detection in analytics, there could be predictive modeling within analytics, subject line optimization, and so on. And these are really, to date, they've been geared at customer experience professionals or marketers primarily. So these are out of the box. Today, you probably don't have too much visibility into what's going on underneath the hood, but they work well and they're providing a lot of efficiency. Where this gets really interesting and starts to converge in with the platform is that we're now opening up the framework. So Sensei isn't just a collection of features, it's actually a machine learning framework that's sitting within the platform. So this means that, say you're a digital analyst, you're not necessarily a data science, you're not kind of writing models in Python or anything, but you know enough to be able to say, well, I want to know how that model's actually being evaluated, or what data I want to train the model on. So you want to look under the hood a little bit. We're going to provide you that capability in the platform so that you can start to configure things. I think the most common use case is you want to use an Adobe propensity model, but you want to train that on your own business data to make it relevant to you. And then the final piece, and this will be exciting for anyone who is actually a data scientist in the room, is that you can bring your own model into the platform so that you can say, Adobe, you know what, you host a lot of data for us, you basically see everything around customer experience, but we've spent X million dollars developing a really decent next best conversation model around our customers. We want to bring that model in its current form into the Adobe data set. So 3 really interesting layers around how we're making this more flexible for you. Okay, we'll flip back and I'll show you this as a very quick snapshot. So you'll hear us talk more and more about this. Everything I described will fall into what we're calling the data science workspace. And so this is an area for both digital analysts as well as data scientists to be able to go in and work. And the way that we're structuring this is you'll have pre-built models and data science capabilities that we refer to as recipes in here. And that could be, like we said, a propensity model around product purchases, and this could be something Adobe's built. It could be an attribution model that we have. Or it could be a recipe that a partner has already uploaded on your behalf. And so when we go into one of these models in here, we can start to get a bit more insight around when this ran. But as a digital analyst, you can actually take a look under the hood. I know these numbers look too perfect to be true. It's a demo. But as an analyst, you can actually go in here and you can say, okay, we're starting to understand accuracy levels and so on. But also, you could start to go in and configure which parts of the schema and the customer data that you have you want to actually run this model across. So no longer are you actually, if you think of the current world of how you're using some of our solutions, we're basically running the model across everything. You can go in and you can start to look at various parts of the platform data that you want to bring in here as well. But then let's take it a level deeper. So if I go back into the data science workspace, you'll see up here we've also got the ability to go ahead and actually start to develop models within the platform itself. Anyone familiar with Jupyter Labs? So one of the very common data science notebooks. This is where a lot of data scientists are actually going in, they're coding, they're developing models itself. Rather than reinventing the wheel, we've simply embedded Jupyter Lab in here and unlocked support for it, so that if you're a data scientist, you can go ahead and you can start to develop in the language of your choice. But going back to that very custom method that we mentioned, you can simply go in here and create a new recipe and start to import a model that you've already created in here. So we've got support for Python, Spark, TensorFlow, and so on, and R, very important. So a lot more flexibility that you're seeing there around data science, and Adobe saying, we do certain parts of machine learning very well, we understand our products really well, but you guys understand your business. And you'll probably have a model, if you're a bank, around financial services that's way better than something we could create, so you can bring that into the platform. Okay, back to the presentation. So just to finish off, around action, and we've kind of been talking about this in every presentation I ever give. We always say, make sure the data's actionable. The first thing to reiterate here is that the cloud platform is underpinning the solutions that you know today. So the idea here is that you bring the data together in the Adobe Cloud Platform, you run data science across that in a very centralized way, and then we have essentially one profile that you're then able to expose to all the solutions. And it starts to move you away from this current state where you're probably collecting data and pushing it to Adobe in multiple places. If any of you are an analytics and an audience manager customer of ours, you're probably running segments in 2 places. So it moves away from that. It means you collect data once, you bring it together, you segment in one place, and then you expose that in real time to the Adobe solutions. But the big opportunity here is actually how we move beyond the Adobe solutions, because we know you've got lots of other technologies. So this is us being able to firstly expose that profile and synchronize that to your own enterprise data lake. So this isn't us making a play to say, don't worry about that data lake you've spent $10 million building, come and buy ours. This is something that coexists. Also, making sure that you can expose this back into CRM, like I said, ERP. It could be a point of sale solution that you want to make sure that you have, a digital interaction surfaced in, so that it's got full support for your enterprise systems. Okay, so shout out back to the kind of technical guys and developers in the room. Is anyone, hands up if you're using Adobe IO today, or if you've been there? Okay, I like 3 hands. That's exactly why I have this slide. We have been through a big effort to centralize a lot of our developer tools and really double down on this. So Adobe IO, which is adobe.io as the URL, is where you as a developer can go to get access to any of the APIs that we have today. We're bringing those together in one place. All of the technical documentation, and pretty much everything I've just described is actually technically documented already on IO. So get on the front foot. I'd say specifically around the experience data model. For those of you that are technical, you may have noticed a few years ago we went through this wave with the Experience Cloud ID service, where we said, hey, we've got a new way of architecting device IDs, and you kind of made a migration. Experience data model is kind of like that when we think about data structure. So look in there, get your head around it, download from the GitHub repository, and start to investigate how you can start to standardize your data into this model. And then the part of the platform that's available today on this second point is Adobe Launch. So once again, if you're an Adobe customer, get stuck into Launch, test it, see how it compares to your other tag management solutions, and start to experiment with it. And then the final one is stay tuned. So this is something that we've been building for 2 years. We've got some customers that are on the alpha and beta programs for this right now, and that'll be running through to the end of 2018. And then moving into 2019, we'll be moving into general availability. So stay tuned. Speak to your account manager if it's something that's really front of mind for you, something that you're evaluating now. There are opportunities for us to look at early access around this, and then reach out to me if you need any follow-ups. So thanks very much. Back to you, Carly.
Thanks, Tom. That was really insightful. Thank you for sharing your advice on how to develop a common data language for our experience business using the Adobe Experience Data Model. So it's now time to hear from Youssef, So Youssef is joining us to talk about the journey Westpac New Zealand have taken to build an experience architecture within their ecosystem. Please let me introduce you to Yousif. He's the Senior CRM and Technical Advisor at Westpac New Zealand. He's an analytics specialist focused on delivering data-driven solutions with over 10 years' experience. This allows Yousif to employ data to drive maximum value for his business through end-to-end solutions. Please join me in welcoming Yousif to the stage.
All right. Morning, everyone. Thanks, Carly, for the introduction. Let me just start by saying what an awesome opportunity to be here and presenting to you guys, and to basically talk about this really interesting project that we worked on last year at Westpac, which is Leads Optimization Engine. We at Westpac have endeavored on a journey, which is to help our customers financially to grow a better New Zealand. So as an analytics team within Westpac, we asked ourselves, how can we do that within our domain, within the bank? So we started by having a good, deep look into our data and the way we communicated with our customers. And basically, quickly it became obvious that there were a lot of enhancement opportunities to basically look at enhance and optimize those conversations that we're having with the customers and to drive a true next best conversation. So we had a deep look, and then after that, we started to look at the idea of an optimization engine. The idea came to life through basically looking at a pipeline of communications, prioritize, and then deliver the next best action from a customer perspective. The exciting stuff is that Adobe Stack has been at the heart of this project, and throughout the presentation, you'd get to know how we utilized our Adobe tools to solve some of those challenges, and hopefully you can walk away with a few learnings to take back into your own business. I'm sure you all have banking relationships, hopefully with Westpac, big W. So at any point, you would have possibly received more than one communication from your bank asking for potentially different things. And let's take Jim here, for example, one of our hero customers, who has a very well-established banking relationship with Westpac. So he owns his own house, he has a steady income coming through to his account, and he's been saving some money aside for a trip. Looking at a pipeline of communications that we could be talking to Jim about, we could be sending him a letter around upgrading his Simple Saver to an online bonus saver so he could earn more interest throughout his savings. He could also be receiving a call from our outbound calling center to talk about his home loan that's soon to be rolled over. He could also be receiving an email talking about new online banking functionalities that we've newly introduced that could be relevant to him. And when he logs into our Westpac One, which is our online banking platform, he could be prompted with a message to change his password since he hasn't done it in the past year. Above all of that, we could have a running hot rate term deposit promotion running through our public website. All of these messages could be valid for Jim, but as a customer could get confused around what is the next best action for him. We basically started tackling these issues. First of all, the nature behind these issues is that customer communications are designed in silos. So it becomes very challenging to do cross-programs prioritization. To tackle these issues, we started by grouping up first, working with our CRM team to group up all of our communications into programs and life cycles, and that would naturally take care of prioritization and serialization of conversations within the program's domain. And that leaves us with a challenge of how do we do cross-programs prioritization? And that basically was the need behind the optimization engine. The concept for the solution was very basic. So we built a pipeline where we accumulate all the customer conversations. We have decisioning that scores and categorize these conversations and will only take through the most important messaging for the customer. We then deploy and listen to our customers' interactions with those conversations, learn, and re-decision. A whole full cycle. So we started small, and we kind of implemented this big concept to a single channel initially, which is our outbound calling channel, and which it had its own challenges. So we had to build functionalities to tackle specifically the challenges for that channel. And then we just recently extended the engine onto our on-site personalization through our Adobe Marketing Cloud. I'll take you through a high-level design of the solution, starting here. Every customer communication starts from a data point. Our analytics function is streaming data from our source systems and our data warehouse to drive the customer's conversations. For every any customer communication that has outbound calling as part of its channel deployment, those would generate what we call leads, and those leads will be pushed onto our managed cloud, which this is where we've deployed our leads optimization engine. So customer communication, extending it onto our managed cloud only for outbound calling. We accumulate all of the leads into our leads pipeline, and then we run them through decisioning workflows. I'll go into details in the next slide around exactly these components and what they perform. But we run the leads through decisioning workflows. The decisioning workflows utilize something called leads optimization engine matrices, which helps decisioning workflows categorize and prioritize these leads, and the output from that operation will be a prioritized and categorized leads pipeline, which has the most important conversations to push out to our outbound calling channel. Then that will get deployed into our channel allocation algorithms. Channel allocation will simply find the best queue to push out those leads to, and then we'll deploy them onto branch and call center queues. Then those leads will be actioned, those conversations we'll have with the customers. The feedback from them will be looped back onto our matrices and taken into consideration for future decisioning. Some of the leads, once they landed channel allocation, will also be extended onto on-site personalized experience. We do that by hashing our customer data and cross-borders to our Adobe Marketing Cloud. We create a segment in our Adobe Audience Manager, and then that segment is passed to our Adobe Target to create that on-site personalized experience. All of that is tracked by our Adobe Analytics. Adobe Analytics will feed that browsing behavior onto the decisioning workflows to be taken into consideration for future scoring. And also, it can act as a source of leads itself, so can add into the leads pipeline. For example, a customer could start an application online and then abandons it halfway through. Then that data will flow into the decisioning workflow to either uplift an existing lead in terms of score that serves the same purpose, or simply create a new lead to have that conversation with the customer. So this is, in a nutshell, very high level, the design for the engine. I'll take you through what these components actually do in a bit more detail. So decisioning workflows, 4 main steps. We pump in all the leads pipeline onto the decisioning workflows. It goes through initially health checks, so that will check for any obvious data quality issues, obvious targeting that could be, it's just a safety net that we have in there, and that will take it through the output from it will go into second step, which is scoring. That's the main function behind the decisioning workflows. So scoring, we can aggregate it into 3 main layers. The very top one is the type of lead that's in the leads pipeline. So that could be a service lead, or a needs met lead, or a compliance, or a brand lead, anything. Every lead type has its own scoring range and naturally groups up similar leads into one bucket. That's the first layer of scoring. Second layer is where we plug in our data science models, so it drives propensity and retention scoring, and would also plug in all of our customer behavior. So if data from Adobe Analytics in terms of browsing behavior will be fed into this second layer of scoring, and stuff like responses to previously deployed leads will also be fed into second layer. The third layer is our business priority layer. So that is basically it's a layer that we use when the data is simply not telling enough about our customers. So if we can't make an informed decision around what is the next best conversation, because we simply can't, we don't have enough about the customer, then we revert back to what is the business priority to talk to them about. So 3 layers. After the scoring is done, then those leads are passed on to contact rules. So contact rules are applied differently to the different type of leads. And the main purpose, of course, behind it is not to overwhelm our customers with the amount of conversations that we're having, and to consolidate the approach for those conversations going forward. Once that's done, then it gets passed onto our channel allocation, which is what I've mentioned before. It will find the best queue in terms of capacity to have that conversation with the customer from our branch and call center network, and for certain type of leads, we'll hash the customer data and then pass it on to our Adobe Marketing Cloud to create a personalized customer experience. In a nutshell, this is what the decisioning workflows will be doing. Let's bring these components to life. There's a lot of components in the engine, and our hero Jim will help us do that. So as I've mentioned before, he's been saving some money aside for a trip, specifically to Canada, because he loves skiing. We generate a lead to talk to Jim about upgrading his simple saver into bonus saver so he can simply earn more interest on his savings. This is interesting. So he'd have that conversation with us and he's not interested. This is really important. This piece of data will be fed back into the decisioning workflows to deprioritize future savings conversations, because the customer is simply not interested and he has other plans. His plans is that he wants easy access onto his savings account so he can go and book his trip. He goes out and books accommodation that's picked up through our analytics function, through our transactional data. We look into his product holdings, and he already has an existing Airpoints Platinum credit card. So we generate a lead to talk about the benefits of his credit card. So it could be, if he books his tickets using the credit card, he'll earn Airpoints, plus he gets free travel cover. So it's a successful conversation. He does exactly that. He finds that useful. He books his ticket through the Platinum credit card. And then once he confirms the travel dates, he'd go online through our online banking platform into the travel section and update the dates for and destination for his trip to make sure that his transactions through his accounts doesn't get interrupted once he lands in Canada. And that's basically a trigger for us to, we'll take that trigger and personalize his on-site experience to talk about shopping as a local once he lands in Canada, talk about a global currency card that he can pre-purchase Canadian dollars and not worry about hefty exchange fees. He goes through that on-site personalization experience. He's actually interested. He goes through it and then starts a form. Doesn't get enough time to actually complete the form, so he abandons it. That's picked up by our Adobe Analytics. And as I said before, it can act as a source of leads. So we'll generate a lead onto our leads optimization engine. The engine will find, since it's a timely conversation, he's going on a trip, then the engine will find the best queue to actually have that conversation with Jim. Jim will get help. He'd complete the application. He'll ask his extra questions to our staff. They clarify that, and then gets his global currency card and pre-purchases his Canadian dollars, goes out to Canada knowing that Westpac have got his back. With that scenario in mind, I'll just touch base on some of the features that we specifically deployed for outbound calling as part of the engine. So we continually monitor our branch and call center queues. We make sure that we always deploy volumes of leads fit for a branch and call center network capacity, and track their historical performance. And basically, we do the lead score upweight and decay is actually such an interesting concept. So very simple. Based on the nature of the lead. So, for example, a home loan rate rollover could start with a normal score, and let's say 60 days prior to the rollover. And if it doesn't get prioritized and sits in the leads pipeline, higher priority conversations would go through. As it continues to wait in the leads pipeline, the score will uplift because the rate rollover date is getting closer and the conversation is naturally becoming more important. If you flip it the other way around, any transactional triggered lead, someone has moved some money into their account and and out of normal kind of behavior, as soon as that lead is generated, then it has the highest score possible at that time, because it's timely conversation. It's all about that transaction happening at that time. And if it doesn't get prioritized, will only decay in score because simply the conversation becomes less and less relevant. Third one is geographical redistribution. So historically, we only deployed leads onto owning branches. So a customer will get their leads straight to their home branch. But if the lead doesn't require physical presence of the customer to actually fulfill it, then we'd move it around geographically to explore more opportunities and minimize the loss of successful conversations with our customers. Skills-aware leads is basically we generate leads based on their skills category to only queues where they have those skills available to actually fulfill those leads. No point in pushing out those conversations if it's a complex lending application and branch doesn't have staff to actually do that. The next one is a full integration. This is under development. A full integration with our human resources management system, and in it, we aim to actually have a plan for extended annual leave for staff, extended leave in general. So we don't wait to be reactive and decrease in capacity for a branch. We can actually, just before they go on leave, we can actually decrease the volume of deployments for that branch. And the last one is branch queue data. We'd love to get real-time data about the length of queues in branches so we can divert leads where they can be fulfilled. We had a lot of learnings, definitely expanding our leads onto our on-site personalization, and any touch point has massively attributed to success. There has been a massive cultural change in terms of our frontline staff have given us really good continuous consolidated feedback around our targeting for the leads, on the prioritization process for the conversations, and around the level of personalization that we've put within the lead itself. So that was very useful in building up the engine. We've always listened to our customers' interactions, and that's a big part. Don't just deploy and forget about it. We need to learn from how customers are interacting with it, and would set the basis for a customer-centric context strategy. Then we'd build up enough knowledge about what type of conversations our customers actually like to have with us. Service equals growth. If you look after your customer, make sure you don't flog them with just random messages, then we'll just naturally result in growth for both customer and bank. And our data science capability has been a massive part of our success. We've seen a really good uplift in successful conversations where data science models have been applied. The last one is a very high level of our future state, where we'd want to actually take this engine is go plug in all of our customer touch points onto the engine and drive what we call next best action. So it doesn't have to be a conversation. It could be anything that we're asking the customer to do. And to go through that engine, which we'd call next best action engine, the engine will, similar concept, will take those MBAs into a decisioning workflow. We'll pass it on to, once we prioritize exactly what is the best conversation or the best action, then that would take it onto a channel dispatch engine. We'd introduce a customer touchpoint center, which is fully plugged in onto our touchpoints to basically collate all of the interactions data into a single source where we can create a dynamic preferences center for our customers. Then we'd know exactly which channels Jim would like for us to talk to him to, and exactly at what time. So the channel dispatch engine can make an informed decision to push out a single message through email between 5 to 6 p.m. because Jim likes to read his emails on the train back to his home. So that's, in a nutshell, that's where we actually want to take it. And yeah, hopefully in a year or two, maybe one of us will come and present back to you guys how we've progressed with it. That's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Youssef, for sharing your journey that you've taken to build an experience architecture at Westpac New Zealand. I'm sure the audience would agree with me that it's so inspirational to really see our customers taking giant leaps forward with the Adobe Experience Cloud. And also knowing your customer through decisioning, be able to truly tailor the customer experience for the customer, not just the journey. So congratulations. For our next guest, please let me introduce you to Kristina Curtis. She's here as the Head of Digital and Customer Analytics at BT, the Wealth Management Division of Westpac. So Kristina joins us to share the journey that BT have taken to bring multiple teams together to create a unified customer experience, and in doing so, breathe life into their customers and understanding them better. Kristina's remit is to drive digital transformation, a step change, if you will. She has a passion for delighting the customer. She leads an innovation team spanning digital and analytics to bring the connected experiences to life. Please join me to welcome Kristina to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Carly. As Carly said, yes, I'm here to share with you the journey that I've been on since joining BT. So as we all know, the customers are calling the shots, and it's all about creating that connected customer experience. I knew when I joined BT there was a lot to do. And I joined the team, and I saw some really great opportunity. But I also wanted to make sure that the team was able to understand and bite off the chunks. So I came up with this mantra, which was we needed to think big, we needed to start small, and we needed to move fast. So how did we go about doing that? Well, we started by creating a unified customer experience. We started with our web properties. When I joined, we had over 76 disparate microsites across the organization, lots of them at times with outdated information and conflicting information. And we stood up our Experience Manager platform, and we migrated the first 12 sites, and then we've progressively migrated the balance of the BT-branded sites. And today I can say I'm really proud that we have 100% of our BT-branded sites migrated. It's about 50 of them. So they're consolidated onto bt.com.au, and also that's been able to provide us an opportunity to go to market really quickly. So we've recently launched a product called Super Invest, and gone are the days where you have to kind of find an agency, get them to build a site, host it externally. We have an internal team. We start from the user experience, customer-centric design, and we're able to rapidly build the websites and get out into market. So as we all know, though, we need to have a vision, and we set out our vision. And it's really about the long game. So our vision starts with the unified customer experience with the AEM platform. We've got our dynamic personalization going, and yes, shamelessly, we're using Adobe Analytics and Target to make that come into life. And then we knew we also needed to get marketing automation in play. We were still stuck in the mode of sending single-shot emails with basically basic name and age demographics to decide who we were going to target. We also have aspirations for the machine learning and the big data domain, and fortunately across the organization that's being set up as central infrastructure. And then lastly, we all know the cherry on the top of the sundae is artificial intelligence, and yes, we aspire to get there. So as you can see on the bottom of the slide, I'm trying to articulate, we're going from basic to unified, and we're progressing on our journey into optimized, automated, and autonomous. Yes, we're lower on the maturity curve in the autonomous space, but we have an aspiration to get there. So the other thing that I did when I joined is I was very fortunate to be able to bring together two domains that actually usually sit very separate in organizations. So I've got the remit of both digital and customer analytics. And so by having that, I'm able to sort of bring to life a lot of the vision and the promise that Adobe brings up at this conference. So how do we create those connected customer experiences? And the team really works together and works with our technology partners and our marketing partners and our product partners as well. But we're able to really span the spectrum of customer analytics, sort of the traditional BI side of things, and now going into big data and data science, marketing automation, using the automation tools, through to digital sales, and actually we're supporting multi-channel sales. The digital experience, as I highlighted earlier in our AAM experience, digital enablement, and lastly, the transformation, how we stand it all up. So let me also give you an example of what we've done, thinking big, starting small, and moving fast. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to follow up people who were dropping out of application forms. And in the past, what we would do is Adobe Analytics would track that for us, and we'd put the data in the warehouse, and actually we did nothing with it. So a few months ago, we said, well, we've got to do something with it. So we were able to, with my campaign team, pick up the data and start running follow-up emails to those customers. But we only had the bandwidth to do it once a week because, you know, it was sort of manual. The other thing we were doing is we would, while sending off the email, also put what we call a next best action in the Westpac Live logged-in banking environment. So then we said, okay, weekly, that's not good enough. We want to move to daily. And so we were able to shorten that elapsed time and really automate an ability to send out those emails daily. But then recently we went live, and I'm really proud to say this, we went live with the ability to send out that email and put that next best action offer in our website in about an hour. And we were very fortunate that another project that was done across the infrastructure team was to push the Adobe Analytics data into our big data platform once an hour. And so what we're able to do is leverage the fact that that data is going into the BDP once an hour, and then we run a mini batch once an hour, and then we work with our data partner in our Adobe Campaign instance to push out those emails. So it's really exciting. So what have we seen? Well, we've seen engagement. Each time we've shortened the time frame that we, from when we follow up with the customer, engagement jumps by 100%. More people are opening those emails, more people are clicking through them, more people are calling us, more people are clicking on the next best action tile in our Westpac Live environment. And what we've also seen is we've seen sales grow. So sales have grown from our past, where it was a weekly email, through to today, where it's hourly, by 40%. So that's really exciting. So the other place where we're playing is in big data. And really, what is big data about? Well, it's about breathing life into understanding our customers. It's around putting all the color in. It's about how we move away from just targeting customers based on age and demographic and slow-moving data that might not change for months or maybe years, to targeting them with fast-moving data, their behaviors, their interactions with us as an organization. And how do we bring that together fast and big and bring it together in an automated way and get those communications out to the customers? So we partner with our infrastructure team who's standing up the big data platform, and we've taken the approach where, well, they've asked us to take the approach, which is refreshing, where we're doing lots of proof of concepts together. So it's a bit of, we have the idea of what we want to do, we set up the proof of concept. Some parts don't work, some parts do work, more from a technical vantage point. And they're learning with us because they're now designing the platform and the environment in a way that is useful to us as stakeholders within the organization. So the other interesting thing about what we're doing, though, is that even though we've got projects and spend, is sometimes we've really got to go out there and we've got to convince our own senior leaders of why we need to invest here. Why do we need to invest in big data? Because everyone, and I think a lot of you are probably stuck in this, everyone is really comfortable with launching a new product. But when you say, I've got to go on this really long journey of building an infrastructure, upgrading the teams, how we operate, bringing more data scientists into the organization, connecting with customers, it's a long journey. And so we're out there, we're thinking big, we're starting small, we're moving fast, and we are getting runs on the board, and we're using those runs on the board to demonstrate success and continue to drive investment in what we do. So I guess lastly, what I wanted to tell you is that I think it's really powerful if you can be standing up for what you believe in. That's what we had to do over at BT. We had some challenges. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of investment funding to begin with, and we really had to go to bat with some ideas, doing the proof of concepts, creating the united customer experience, and getting some runs on the board. So that's, I guess, my last words of wisdom and sage for you, is to stand up for what you believe in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristina, for sharing your journey and how you're bringing multiple teams together to create that unified customer experience and to breathe life into understanding your customers, something that many of us aspire to do and are working on tirelessly day in, day out. So we started this session with the question, where should you start? And so over the last 90 minutes, you've heard from 3 amazing speakers who have shared different perspectives and advice on where to start and how to build the capabilities needed to grow into an experience business. So simply, you should start by adopting an experience architecture. I know I make it sound easy, but I understand it's not. But take your experience architecture, connecting your legacy systems to an extensible platform. Start by adopting an iterative decision logic and automate processes at every turn. Start by anchoring your data capture on measurement and insights along the customer journey. And don't let your organisational structure defy change. Identify evangelists throughout your organisation that buy into your vision. And then start small and iterate. I'd now like to take the time to bring the 3 speakers up on stage. And I'd like to invite you to ask any questions that you may have on the tips of your tongue. Please come up to the speakers that are in the walkways. Is there anyone that has any questions?
So my question has to do with the role of data lakes in an environment where platforms are becoming increasingly open and accessible and data is becoming more structured. So does the importance of centralizing all your data in one lake start to move to the wayside when, if you have all these different platforms that have their data organized, that have open APIs, is it better to take that cloud approach and let platforms interact together, making the role of that centralized data lake redundant? That's for anyone that's sort of willing to answer.
Yeah. I'm happy to say the Adobe view on this, because it kind of talks quite nicely around how most of our large customers have a data lake initiative and they're centralizing that data. But if you think about the huge variety of customer experience data that a company like Adobe might collect on your behalf, there isn't a need to bring that all together in one place. And actually, to do that as a company, for you guys, that's a huge investment. So I think the way that we're approaching it and architecting it is that you can have more than one, and that really the connections between them are the critical things. And that's why the integrations that we've been looking at that are, streaming over HTTP, it's all API enabled. We're trying to move away from this latency of file transfers, means that it can coexist. And so the way that we're looking at it is that you could actually query the Adobe platform data from within your own ETL tool. So this notion of kind of data virtualization becomes quite important. So it can reside in different places. Obviously, less is more. But it doesn't mean that you have to go on this big drive to bring absolutely every single data source into your own enterprise data lake. You can have more than one, and they can coexist.
Mine was similar.
Yeah.
If you don't have a data lake, then can you jump straight to your solution?
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
You can.
So, if you haven't got to that point in your journey, don't go down that route would be your recommendation at this point in time?
Well, you're at an Adobe conference asking an Adobe guy. There's only one answer I'm going to give. But I think the reality is there's different sizes of company as well, with different levels of technical expertise. So, if we're looking at a large bank, a large telco, there's a maturity there around, this, migration away from those legacy systems, bringing it into a big data lake. But for, maybe a tier down in terms of company size, absolutely, you can outsource that. And that's part of the approach that we're taking, which is we think different sizes of company will probably use the platform in different ways. And actually, what we hope is that, companies of, that maybe haven't embarked on the data lake initiative can say, great, I'll actually bring the CRM, the ERP, data in. And if you think about what that opens up, if you'll say, an Adobe Analytics customer, I'm going into pitch mode here, but if you think about the world for us around something like analytics, it's typically been web and mobile analytics to date. If you think about analytics as an application sitting on top of a platform, you could be a company that doesn't even really have a sizable website, like a CPG company. You could actually bring all of your sales data into that and use analytics as a visualization application, on top of that. So it starts to really open up use cases and become a lot more flexible.
Great, thank you.
I'll stop pitching now.
Yeah. Yeah. Please come on up.
Ashish from Seba Super. Question for Kristina. Two questions, actually. So one is, are you using your products in silos, or are they integrated to each other? Second is around governance. So especially around on-site personalization and coming from a regulatory, super and financial industry. How did you overcome that, and any insights for us?
Well, the products are still very siloed, actually. And so the interesting challenge we have being the digital and the customer analytics team is changing the mindset of the division of the organization around how we think differently, how we do things very differently. So we actually live and breathe every day with the convergence of conflicting priorities, or one product team wants to do one thing and another product team wants to do another thing, and it converges at the pointy end of the customer. And so we often find that we're arbitrating with our internal customers. Yes, superannuation is highly regulated, and yes, we need to take the time, and often it slows us down in terms of reviewing again what we want to say. And so we have this constant philosophical challenge that we're trying to work through, which is how can we be fast-moving and iterate, but also comply with the legislation. So that's what you have to do.
Hi everyone, I'm Dale. I am interested in the scoring models that you guys are using, and particularly where you're at in terms of the business process around how you build and evolve those scoring models, because we've all seen, to put it in concrete terms, we've all seen you go and look at something on a website, that ad will follow you around, but perhaps you've bought the product and the ad is still following you around. So how are you building out your models, and what's the business process you're using for elasticity of weighting, temporal validity, all that kind of stuff that, how do you build your models? I'd be interested in learning a bit more about that.
I'll let you answer.
Yeah. So interesting enough, that leads optimization engine that we've built has a kind of an extendable scoring mechanism. So by kind of decoupling the business logic from the actual models that input into the scoring, we've kind of created this extendable. You can plug in as more data science, our data science team, as they produce more of those predictive models, or as we even if it's simply getting a new data source for customer behavior, you can plug in that and factor it into. So it's just, taking that into consideration. How much weight do you put on that behavior in terms of scoring, and then factor that in within your scoring calculations. So you plug in, your propensity scoring, your retention scoring, and then you classify the conversations. You plug in your customer behavior. Okay, you segment that customer behavior into what exactly the type of pages that they've been browsing on. You can segment them through different triggers that they, for example, if you want a decision for, in our case, for example, show their extensive behavior in a home loan, then you can identify some of the triggers, playing around with the mortgage calculator, checking out the interest pages, all of that stuff, as you can bump up the score for certain kind of product portfolios, for example. And the more data you've got in terms of either a touch point or any customer behavior, transactional triggers, pump them through and then plug them in, and then kind of have a weight for that data source to take into consideration for scoring. That's mainly the philosophy that we've kind of followed to make it more extendable. So we didn't kind of embed certain models within the scoring and we just shut it down as a black box. We kind of opened it up to plug in more, define that input, give it a weight, and take it into future scoring. That's the approach that we kind of went through.
And Dale, I think there's a couple of other points that you mentioned there around. So we've seen this. There's a big theme around optimizing or personalizing for the visit and the context as much of the visitor as well. And so obviously that differs by product. If you're talking about a home loan, that's a huge consideration cycle. But kind of actually understanding the purpose of why a customer might be coming to you, and then maybe forgetting what you were thinking before that. So it could be you coming and playing with a calculator, and actually, geez, forget everything we thought about your eligibility for a credit card. We should flip to this. So the context is becoming a lot more front of mind.
Yeah.
Once again, the other part is that the data that you're able to decision on is the key thing there. It's that if you're not knowing that they've actually walked into a branch or a store and they've taken out the product and you're not integrating that data in, then it's all useless because you're still remarketing like crazy and advertising. So the data that's powering it, and then kind of understanding context in line with all of your predictions and things that you think the customer might want as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the more you know, the more data you run through it, the clearer kind of vision that you've got around exactly what the customer needs.
Work on an evolving model as opposed to
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this also gives you the opportunity to push your infrastructure and tech people to be continuously reducing the latency of the data that they're collecting. And so by what we're trying to do, and by using the big data platform, is that we're talking about fast data and putting it in there, and then having that be the area where it then pushes out to the campaign engines or to target after it can look at the data that's coming from multiple sources. And as we remove latency, we get much more able to include the behavioral data, real-time insights.
Fantastic, great question. All right, well, thank you very much for giving up your morning and spending the time with us. To hear more stories of others who have built either an experienced system of record, who are navigating organisational change, or who are building an experienced business, I encourage you all to take the time to visit the Adobe Experience League. Thanks again.